Hey everyone, What If Fan here, bringing you another exciting part of What If Transmigrated as Minato Namikaze. You can find the fanfic title and the original author's name on my Patreon page. Make sure to check it out and show them some love. If you enjoy the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell so you never miss an upload. Quick update. The series What If Transmigrated in Bleach World will be going on hold soon, since we've nearly caught up with the author. So now, I will be using the second most popular among the fanfics on the previous poll as the replacement for the series What If Transmigrated in Bleach World. As such, please vote in the poll and let me know which story you'd like to see next. Also check out my Patreon channel for early releases of all the series, where you can find all the series released one day ahead of YouTube. Alright, let's jump into it. Chapter 271, Konoha's Trap. Third-person POV. Konoha, Year 42. A group of over 100 ninjas advanced that afternoon until they spotted a rocky area in the middle of the desert, with no vegetation in the region, only sand and stone. "Looks like we found our target," one of the leaders said as they headed that way. At the leader's signal, they stopped about a kilometer away, analyzing the situation, looking for scout ninjas, but there were none on the rocks, which was strange. "Do you have sensory ninjas there?" the leader of the 5 Suna squads asked. The other leader from Konoha nodded, and some ninjas stepped forward. "You too, Lumen. I want you to identify how many ninjas are in there." The leader asked directly to Minato, who nodded without needing to say anything else. He entered the theater, crossed his fingers, and closed his eyes, appearing to concentrate. "There's a barrier at the location inside the cave, but there's a considerable group of chakras there, from what I can feel," one of the sensors reported, while the leader looked at Minato, who was the best sensor in the group. The others couldn't see through the barrier, not even the Hyugas among the Anbu. "There are 50 ninjas inside, with several dead bodies. None of them are military, so they're all civilians from the village we checked in the Land of Fire. They have puppets," Minato said calmly, surprising the Suna ninjas, though some already expected something like that from the hero. His detection abilities were very famous. "Great, then let's get ready," the leader declared. "Are we attacking directly?" another squad leader asked. "We outnumber them. I trust Minato's judgment, he's reliable. So we can launch a direct attack," the leader responded. So impatient, Minato thought before deciding to join the discussion. He raised his hand. "Permission to speak," Lumen spoke up. "Of course, Lumen. Share your opinion," the leader replied, while Minato could feel the narrowed gaze behind the leader's mask. "I'd like to go in with my team to check the situation inside the barrier. If any trap is triggered, I can simply teleport my entire team out using my teleportation jutsu," he explained. The leader furrowed his brow, surprised that Minato revealed his jutsu so directly. Not that no one already knew, but still, he nodded, thinking it could be a good idea for their plans. Meanwhile, Minato could feel the discomfort in his own team. They didn't seem very comfortable with the plan, which had been intentional. "Maybe it's a fair price to pay for having been watching me for over 6 months, waiting for the moment to kill me," Minato concluded internally. "All right. We'll let Lumen's team go first," the leader said, turning to the other Konoha leaders, feeling a bit strange about the situation. "I want everyone ready for battle," Minato demanded from behind his mask, as his team positioned themselves by his side, trying not to show discomfort with the situation. Minato could already imagine what was about to happen. They remained there for about 20 minutes, waiting for any reaction from the cave among the rocks. When the moment came, Minato raised his hand and quickly lowered it, giving the signal. He advanced with his men, kicking sand back as their feet struck the soft ground at high speed. The 12 ninjas advanced quickly, approaching the rocky area and entering it, heading inside the cave within the location. "Everyone, be ready," Minato said, as he began forming 2 clones, who moved ahead to gather information before Minato arrived at the scene. The 2 clones found an open area further down the cave, jumping into the place since the ninjas inside were already waiting for them, and were faced with a group of ninjas without headbands, all with various types of puppets pointed at the entrance, a trap. Minato felt his kunai, left for the other Konoha ninjas outside, being destroyed. Since the seal had been erased, he no longer had a connection to the location, but he didn't care. They wanted to trap him there. That was clearly the first attempt to kill him. The clones were quickly struck by weapons launched from the puppets, exploding just as the real Minato advanced forward despite receiving the information. "Prepare for battle," he said, strangely excited, a smile forming behind his mask. But when he looked back, he saw the group had stopped, letting him move forward alone. "What? You're going to abandon me?" Minato said, as all kinds of weapons were already being launched at him, various types of poison kunai, poisonous gas, and even acid, trying to destroy him right there. At the same time, he felt a barrier forming around the rock formation, trying to block his teleportation. All the ninjas were gathering around, forming a large fuinjutsu. But that didn't matter now. First, he had to deal with the enemies they're trying to kill him. There were also the bodies of all the civilians, but they were all dead. There was nothing to be done. He felt some interference in space, not knowing if he could use his teleportation jutsu to leave the cave, but who said he couldn't use it inside it? Quickly, he made a hand sign. "Quick, let's get out of here," the Root Group, former teammates of Minato, shouted, as Minato's team began to move out, leaving him to fight alone, fully aware that if Minato survived, they would destroy the place and no one wanted to die. What they hadn't counted on was that Minato had used his own seal on each of them to teleport them. And suddenly, as they reached the exit, they all found themselves in the middle of chaos, the scenario shifting in an instant, as Minato placed them right at the center of the battle around him, while all kinds of attacks were already approaching. "Well, I admit you did your best to play along with this little charade, even keeping your seals, knowing I might sense something wrong if you removed them. And knowing that, you erased them. So, where do you think you're going? Can't you see your captain is fighting alone?" Minato said, his voice echoing through the cave, while everyone looked on in shock. But it was already too late. Most were quickly attacked before they could react. The blows were already just centimeters away from them. Minato turned into light to escape, making the area flash brightly, and reappeared on the ceiling of the cave, watching the traitors being struck. Some burned by the acids, others poisoned by the gas, while the last one screamed, pierced by their own allies' weapons. He quickly grabbed 2 kunai and threw them down, forming a shadow clone jutsu, as they began to transform and spread throughout the cave. Moments later, the puppet-wielding ninjas were surprised, seeing kunai clones and more kunai clones falling everywhere, hitting even the unaware or landing on the puppets themselves. "We didn't hit the target," a group of ninjas shouted, with most of Minato's team being taken down, though some managed to escape the range of the attacks. They quickly began aiming all the puppets directly at Minato, who was on the ceiling, upside down. But he simply vanished from there. Now the show would begin. He quickly began appearing in the middle of the cave, killing the enemies, as screams started echoing through the place. He simply used the kunai spread everywhere to teleport. "Quick, destroy the kunai!" someone shouted, just before losing their head. "Attack from all sides. Don't let him get close." Others began releasing poison throughout the entire area, hitting even their own allies or themselves as they screamed in pain. But Minato reappeared from every direction, killing them one by one. In less than 10 seconds, 50 ninjas were dead. 2 of Minato's ANBU team members quickly ran through the chaos, still alive, heading for the exit after having survived the initial attack. But Minato, still in the middle of the cave, was smiling as he formed a hand sign. Then they simply vanished and reappeared in front of Minato once again, staring at him as he stared back. "Impossible. We threw your kunai away," they muttered. "I placed a seal on your masks without you noticing, before you were hit," Minato explained. "You knew the whole time," one of them muttered cautiously. There was no point in hiding it anymore, as Minato nodded. He had always known. "Anyway, let's finish this. It was nice working with you these past 6 months. Now I've got things to deal with in the village." With that, Minato simply slit both their throats, killing them right there. Poison filled the entire area, along with the gas. As Minato leapt to the top of the place, the barrier inside the cave began to deactivate, and the sensory ninjas outside discovered that only one person was still alive in the middle of it all. That could mean only one thing to those ninjas. "Let's see what you'll do now," Minato murmured, as he began to feel the cave tremble. That's when he realized they were creating a combined Earth-style jutsu to bury the entire place, and he couldn't teleport out. This was the true trap, with the intention of sacrificing even their own ninjas inside to surround him. He simply let the entire place shake as he watched the area being devastated, showing no fear or even the intention to escape. He could have used his lightspeed movement to reach the exit, but he remained calm, his tangible body steady. His observation haki was not alarmed at all. From outside, the leader shouted as the entire rocky area, over 100 meters in diameter, began to shake and sink, the earth rapidly closing in around it, crushing everything underground with a thunderous sound echoing through the entire desert region. The process was slow, but devastating. And there was no sign Minato had escaped, as the sensors kept a close watch on his chakra. "Did we get him?" the leader asked from outside, looking at the completely devastated site, with a large cloud of dust and rocks everywhere, waiting for the sensors' confirmation. "He was buried, but he's still alive," Konoha's sensors exclaimed. "What? He survived that?" The Konoha leader was shocked. Konoha's mission was to eliminate Minato, a threat to the village, leader of a coup against the Hokage. "But he's buried. Let's finish this today," the Suna ninjas said, still seeing an advantage at that moment. They were about to act when, suddenly, beams of light began shooting out from between the rocks, rising toward the sky. No one understood what was happening, as the light started to gather at a specific point, more than 30 meters from the center of the destruction. The light quickly began to form a body, a yellow glow. And then Minato reappeared, floating in the sky, calmly watching everyone. "Well, I must admit, at least you tried," Minato said simply, smiling. All the ninjas were stunned by what they had just seen, perhaps because it was the first time Minato had revealed the power of a Logia so openly. He wouldn't be holding back against all 100 ninjas present. Chapter 272. You're going to help me tonight. Third-person POV. Konoha, Year 42. The ninjas were displaying various feelings and expressions, as Minato could perceive through observation haki. Disbelief was the strongest emotion everyone felt upon seeing him there, standing still in the sky while his clothes moved with the desert wind. Certainly, someone would ask what was happening in the next moment. But should he allow something so predictable to happen? Minato moved his hand to his mask and removed it. There was nothing more to do, this was their mission, and Minato no longer needed to act. There was nothing left to say. So, he simply ignored the surprised looks and glowed, before anyone could react. His body turned into light, his radiance taking everyone by surprise. They were lucky no Uchiha was present, for one would surely have warned about this ability one Minato had only used against the Uchiha clan, within the walls of their compound. And the Uchiha weren't the type to brag about having lost to a single boy, one against dozens of them. Quickly, the brightness outshone the sun. It shone so brightly it hurt everyone's eyes, making them groan and cry out in discomfort, backing away from the area defensively. And in the next moment, Minato glowed again and vanished, reappearing beside a sand ninja, only to pierce his neck with his kunai. He glowed once more and dashed in a straight line with a yellow flash toward another ninja, who didn't even have time to react before Minato simply sliced off his head. He was a leaf ninja, another one working for Root. The blood had just begun to spill from their necks as Minato looked at his kunai and cast it aside, before summoning his sword, gripping the hilt and charging at the next ninja, cutting him down easily. "He's killing us!" A shout echoed, while the ninjas were still trying to regain their sight, and this one was clearly a censor. And Minato was already dashing in a straight line through the row of ninjas, cutting down one shinobi after another, without teleporting, only using his speed and the way his Logia traveled through space. It all happened in less than a second. While the ninjas were still trying to recover, Minato had already killed 30 of them, with the other 70 trying to retreat immediately. Minato returned to the sky, gazing down at the scene, as the others stared at their comrades all falling in unison, as if they had been killed at the exact same moment. Most were beheaded, consisting of Suna ninjas and other direct route operatives.
Minato looked at the last 70 ninjas remaining. There was nothing more to say. They were enemies, while he could feel the caution and horrified stares of most directed at him, still floating in the sky with his sword in hand. He glowed once more. The enemies were more prepared, but this time, he used it differently. He simply teleported while still glowing and appeared in front of another ninja, killing him, and moved on to the next target, cutting him down effortlessly. The ninjas couldn't even react. Especially with the domination of light, Minato was glowing the entire time, blinding their vision as he moved. He didn't even need to touch the ground, which made it even harder for the enemies to react properly. They tried to respond to someone who could attack them without them being able to open their eyes or even know his location, while he floated through the air, never touching the sand, which would have been their best chance to track him in that blinding flash, killing all of them. "Quick, use jutsus and defenses!" shouted one of the last Suna ninjas, as a net-like formation began to take shape. Jutsus of various elements were launched, but no one could open their eyes, all were being fired blindly, while Minato, still resembling a fluorescent light in the middle of the desert, zigzagged like a yellow laser, weaving between the jutsus. He circled around a stone wall and quickly killed 4 ninjas with a single slash, as the Suna headbands fell to the ground along with their severed heads. Most had already been killed, only 40 remained alive. Minato continued zigzagging, cutting each one of them down. They finally tried to react, realizing how useless they were in that situation, hiding underground. Minato returned to the sky before creating several clones, which spread out through the area. Those who didn't have Earth style to hide were looking around, dazed, while everyone began casting jutsus and trying to escape. All the clones began to glow as well, emitting light just as bright as Minato's, but this time, they were using actual light-style jutsus. While the entire area shone intensely with his clones, Minato was looking at the ground. He could easily sense where the ninjas were hiding using observation haki. His gaze followed the ninjas concealed underground, while his katana turned black with armament haki and he began moving his hand at high speed, releasing slashes from the blade, directly into the sand. The slash flew at high speed and easily pierced the sand. He could feel the muffled screams of horror from those beneath the earth. The slashes simply tore through the entire underground layer of the desert to reach them. Even if they were 20 or 30 meters away, Minato could reach them using the slashes imbued with armament haki. The sensor ninjas had a better sense of the battlefield without needing to see through so much light, and all they could feel was horror, their group falling one by one easily, with no resistance against the hero of the Leaf Village. They asked themselves why the village had sent them to kill that monster. 10 teams plus a trap against just one person. How could the result be their own massacre? Minato sensed black sand approaching his body, and, just as he considered laughing at it, he simply moved his sword, turning it into yellow light before releasing an aerial slash of light directly at the ground. The aerial slash struck and exploded right there, quickly engulfing the entire area, covering both the destroyed cavern and everything around it. Suddenly, a massive explosion of light surged outward in all directions like a bijou dama. This was the training Minato had undergone with Tsukumo Hatake. This was the result of his greatest attacks, now equivalent to that of a bijou. The explosion was greater than any beam of light or raisin shuriken he had ever launched. When it finally began to settle, all the clones that had been glowing were gone, eliminated in the blast. Everyone underground was killed instantly, as the light penetrated up to 50 meters into the ground. Sunlight returned to the sky as the sound of the explosion continued echoing through the desert as it spread in every direction. Only a few ninjas survived, those who had stayed at a distance, trying to regroup. The desert was becoming quiet again, while the last Konoha Anbu looked at all that destruction with eyes filled with fear. What was that? How can he have so much power? That question began forming in their minds. He's become too powerful. Maybe he was hiding his strength the entire time. Not even the Hokage truly knew this. He's very different from what we were told. One of them said. Yeah, you're right. The voice immediately made them all turn, looking behind them at someone standing there, wondering when Minato had appeared behind them. He wore an arrogant expression as he looked at the Anbu. How could you know? I never needed to use my full strength. Which proves that, if I really wanted to take down the village with the Hokage, I probably would have done it right there. I simply could have done it. The entire village can't even fight back against me. Even if all the forces came together, the result would still be the same. Minato spoke arrogantly, while the Umbu stepped back, fear in their eyes. Are you going to kill me? One of them murmured. I know you, Barky. It's a shame that, in the end, you were conspiring against me. We worked in Team Alpha together. Minato said with a look of disappointment. These last Umbu were the ones the Hokage himself had sent to eliminate him. These are the Hokage's orders, Minato. He said you were a threat to the village, that you intended to start a civil war. A civil war? I want to uphold something that aligns with Konoha's values. Protecting my allies. The Hokage sacrificed the Uzumaki. That doesn't share the same principles the village was founded upon, Barky. Minato said. Even so, for peace, he insisted, though Minato could feel the fear in his voice. A peace that could be shattered at any moment. Do you really think this will stop the Third Great Ninja War? No. The other nations lost too much in the Second War. Eliminating the Uzumaki was just an excuse to weaken Konoha in a ploy for another war. But I won't ask you to understand that. You all just follow orders. Your mission is to carry them out, not to question them. That's how most shinobi are supposed to be, right? Minato mocked them. Then kill us already, another said, raising his head. We know we can't face you now. You just killed most of the ninjas here without any difficulty. Why are you even talking to us? Because I'm going to let you return to Konoha. I won't leave anyone from Root alive. But I'd like a few of those who planned my assassination to remain alive. After all, I'll need witnesses to confirm it in front of others in the village. Minato said calmly, while the Umbu were already wondering if he was joking or not. Anyway, you'd better head back to Konoha. Leave this place before the Suna ninjas arrive. We've drawn too much attention. Minato informed. Tonight, I intend to act. So you'd better be there. Minato added, as the Umbu looked surprised. They stared, confused, not knowing whether that would benefit them or Minato himself. But they had no other choice. Go. There are still 18 of you. Do you want to die like your comrades, in vain, or return to your families? He said all that was needed, and the Umbu began to run from the scene. But Minato stopped one of them. I said 18 ninjas. You have 19. Lastly, Orochimaru, you stay. Minato said calmly, while the masked ninja, none other than Orochimaru, was left stunned by Minato's deduction. You can go. Go. Minato gestured with his hand, and the Konoha ninjas simply left, leaving behind only the one Minato had called out, as he removed his mask and revealed his serpent-like face, shriveled skin and snake eyes. You really are fascinating, Minato-kun, he said, his tongue sliding across his lips. Minato watched him as that serpentine face, with pale wrinkled skin and snake eyes, revealed none other than a legendary Sannin, one who had miserably failed to kill him. And there was another who had survived among the Suna ninjas. Come on, Raza. I know you're there. That black sand that tried to grab me was useless. Minato mocked, as a ninja emerged from the sand, a bit farther from the explosion, where a huge crater had formed. Raza emerged from it with a dark look. Minato would now face the two of them. Chapter 273, Executing a Kage. Third-person POV. Konoha, Year 42. Ah! Blood spurted from Raza's chest as he flew like a directionless stone, bouncing across the desert and kicking up sand as his body hit the ground, leaving a small trail of blood. Minato moved his sword to the side and wiped the blood from the armament haki, his gaze turning to the other corpse on the ground. Orochimaru appeared, tearing open the body as he looked at Minato floating in the sky. And to think that you, Minato-kun. He couldn't finish, before his neck was sliced. Minato had appeared behind him like a flash of light after traveling the distance in milliseconds. That you were this dangerous all along. Orochimaru's voice emerged again behind Minato,
already in another intact body with his head in place. A bolt of lightning struck his forehead before he could react, piercing his brain. Orochimaru collapsed to the ground with a hole in his head. It didn't take long before his mouth opened wider than it should have, and hands began to emerge from within, as he slithered out covered in slime. Minato looked at it with disgust and left him to finish his substitution, turning his gaze to the other man recovering in the distance with a pierced chest. Minato appeared beside him before he could react, glowing with light, and Raza felt a horrible stab of pain as Minato kicked his already pierced chest, sending him flying several meters away. He simply glowed and appeared in front of Orochimaru once again, while the Sannin watched with great interest. Such interesting abilities. I've heard about this, but there were very few reports. Small details in the mission files, it's incredible. Is this a Kekkei Genkai? I've never heard anything about it. Orochimaru seemed fascinated. He lost his head once again, falling like a corpse as a shadow rose from the ground with a new body. You know that's not going to work on me, Orochimaru boldly declared. Do you have the chakra to keep doing this all day? If you can keep it up until nightfall, you might survive, Minato said with a small smile, mocking the snake. And his words seemed to worry him, as his face darkened for a moment. I feel your nervousness, your fear, you're a little frustrated too, aren't you? Minato said, still in a mocking tone. Orochimaru looked both surprised and cautious at these words. There was no way to fake it. I can also feel people's emotions. I know you're having flashbacks of when you fought Hanzo, how you were cornered with Sensei and Miss Tsunade. I feel the fear in you, Orochimaru. You don't intend to let me go, do you? Orochimaru couldn't react to Minato's swift attacks, he couldn't keep up with his speed. If you survive until nightfall, you got lucky. After all, I need to be in the village to launch my plans against the Hokage's decision. At least you'll be here, busy, getting out of this country, Minato said with an indifferent tone. Exclamation point. Orochimaru simply opened his mouth in front of Minato, and his sword began to extend, striking Minato in the middle of the chest, piercing through and expanding, dozens of blades shooting through Minato. But Orochimaru's eyes revealed surprise as he thought he had hit him. His sword was penetrating Minato's chest, and yet there was no reaction from him, as if it were no bother at all. Minato transformed his body into light and flew several meters, still with the sword impaled in him, then drove his own blade into Orochimaru's eye, piercing his brain. Blood dripped as the Sannin collapsed to the ground. Minato turned into light again, flying off the sword and dropping into the desert, then rose once more into the sky, now setting his gaze on Raza, who was watching from afar with a cautious look. Minato pointed his finger at him and immediately began firing bolts of lightning. Raza shielded himself with golden sand, and the blasts created colossal explosions across the desert, while Minato ignored a new Orochimaru running beneath the sand and leaving the area, turning his eyes southward. Ninjas were arriving at that moment. Soon as reinforcements had come after all the explosions Minato had caused. He simply smiled. After all, it was a good opportunity to weaken the sand village a bit. Minato vanished and moved to the center of the desert, plunging his haki-coated hand into the sand and pulling out a snake with a dazed look, tossing it into the sky and pointing his finger at it, blasting it with his laser ray. Think you can escape like that, Orochimaru? Minato said, and Raza appeared in the affected area, somewhat cautious and clearly exhausted. The future fourth Kazekage looked to the side in surprise and froze. There was a Minato kunai buried within his golden sand. The man widened his eyes the moment Minato appeared beside him, a Rasengan in hand, larger than usual, the smaller version of the Yotama Rasengan, without giving Raza time to react or attack with sand, though he tried. The Rasengan hit him and launched him hundreds of kilometers away, and Minato could feel that this attack had brought him down. A man destined to be the next Kazekage, and he went down so easily. Minato didn't hold back the mockery as he sensed Raza falling to the ground, beaten and broken. He wouldn't die there, because Minato saw something positive in him having children in the coming years. If Temari hadn't already been born by now. Either way, Minato saw that some of the snake's remains from the explosion had fallen to the ground and started forming a new Orochimaru. Minato destroyed him once more,
firing a bolt before Orochimaru could complete the substitution. He waited for Orochimaru to reappear, but the Sannin seemed to have vanished for now. Minato could still feel his chakra lingering in the desert, but it seemed Orochimaru had decided to preserve chakra, indicating he couldn't keep up the substitution forever. Minato saw the ninjas approaching in the distance and transformed into light. The Suna squads only saw a flash of light in the sky before being struck by multiple bolts of lightning raining down on them at that very moment. Dozens of teams were hit by the explosions. Orochimaru burst from the sand just then, landing on a dune and looking out toward the sound of the blasts in the distance. Looks like Minato will be busy with the Suna ninjas, better head back to the land of fire. Orochimaru decided as he was about to leave the area. Tell me, Orochimaru, have you ever been kicked at the speed of light? Orochimaru's eyes widened in a daze as Minato appeared behind him, his leg glowing as it slammed into the Sannin's face, crushing it. Orochimaru's body was twisted by the force of the kick and sent flying south like a bullet, unable to resist. Minato landed on the ground and smiled. He was having fun, and it would be a lie to say otherwise. How good it feels to not have to hold back anymore. He thought as his eyes began to change, entering Sage mode right then and there. Minato shone and shot forward toward the distant Suna ninjas, the same direction where he had sent Orochimaru flying. Several Suna ninjas had already vanished with the initial attack, and the survivors were trying to regroup, searching for the enemy, only for Minato to be seen kicking Orochimaru again in that moment. Then it happened, Orochimaru himself slammed right into the middle of them, killing several on the spot as his out-of-control body crashed down. Minato appeared in the distance with two more clones. The cutting sound rang out, and each of the clones had a Raisin Shuriken in hand, aimed forward, before all three launched their Raisin Shuriken at the group ahead. Boom! Most of the desert heard the echo of the explosions in the distance. A fist slammed against a table. What are you saying? That entire team's failed and they're all dead? The third Kazekage was stunned by the report he had just received. Yes, Kazekage-sama. Except for Raza, everyone is dead. Our patrols and reinforcements were sent out, but the explosions we're hearing in the north are not something our ninjas are capable of producing, said the Jonin standing before the Kage. Damn it! Frustration consumed the Kazekage. He had struck a deal with the Hokage himself to eliminate Minato, accepting the proposal and trusting in it, knowing the boy was a threat to Suna if he continued to grow. Demonstrating his incredible abilities in the war, while the Hokage also feared the boy's power and influence in Konoha. He was a variable that had to be eliminated. I want all squads ready to come with me. We'll also bring the Jinchuriki. The Kazekage gave the order. And all troops prepared to depart for the Uzushiogakure assault, my lord? The man insisted, knowing this action could delay them. We have no choice. Minato Namikaze is as dangerous a variable as the entire Uzumaki clan is to Konoha. He decided as they left the village. Orochimaru's head hit the ground once more, before a snake crawled out of his mouth only for Minato to stab its head the moment it began to slither. Minato was merely toying with the Sannin, not even letting him speak anymore, just killing him over and over. Orochimaru looked increasingly frustrated, and Minato noticed he had reached his limit. An explosion erupted in the middle of the desert as giant snakes began to emerge, and Minato could also feel a large number of troops approaching from a distance, as if Suna were heading to war. Minato didn't retaliate and instead waited for them to come closer. Oh? Third Kazekage, it's been a while, hasn't it? Minato ignored Orochimaru and looked toward the man, who was analyzing both Minato and Orochimaru, realizing they were enemies while the area was littered with corpses. Some distance away lay bodies of Konoha ninjas, but that didn't matter now. You're killing the shinobi of Sunagakure, you're about to die, Minato Namikaze. He declared. So be it, come at me with everything you've got. Minato mocked. This brat. The Kazekage grew furious at the statement as his iron sand began to emerge in front of him. An explosion near the group erupted as Shikaku appeared. I'm back. He sounded excited. Hello, Sand Raccoon. Minato said, unnoticed, standing on Shikaku's nose. Wait. You're the one who stole my chakra and hit me. The One-Tail wasn't happy with those memories. If you want a rematch, bring it on. Was all Minato said, smiling as he turned toward the Suna ninjas, the Kazekage, and Orochimaru before him. He looked at the position of the sun. This will be interesting, he declared internally, seeing he still had some time before nightfall. The sun began to sink quickly. As it hit the horizon, Suna's desert became a fierce battlefield in the final hours, with explosions and war cries echoing everything to stop one man. But as the sun set, the Suna army that remained was speechless. After all, they hadn't even managed to wound the boy. No, Minato was now standing before the third Kazekage, katana in hand. The third Kazekage was on his knees, his iron sand barely rising anymore, his eyes filled with fear and frustration at the sight of Minato before him. Looks like it's over. Today, the 5 nations lose a Kage, was all Minato said before swinging his sword and severing the Kage's head. Silence overtook the desert in that moment. Ninjas stared at the scene in disbelief that they had lost a Kage so easily. Minato ignored the crowd of Suna shinobi and turned his gaze to a tired Orochimaru in the distance, dead giant snakes scattered across the ground. Looks like you passed. Pray the Hokage succeeds in trying to stop me. Because I don't know if I'd let him live once I step through the village gates, Minato declared before vanishing the next moment, just as night finally fell upon the continent of the 5 great nations. Chapter 274, The Dark Night in Konoha begins. Third-person POV. Konoha, year 42. Minato appeared atop the first Hokage's stone head in an instant, while Konoha was beginning to light up in various corners. Konoha seemed quiet, far more than usual this night. Despite the lights, everything there felt like a grand illusion, while a pressure weighed down the air. The atmosphere felt like it was pushing Konoha down. This would be a somber night, Minato knew that very well. With a sigh, he first began to scan the entire village, wanting to identify everything, while still unnoticed by the village sensors guarding the barrier in the protection room, where several Fuinjutsu specialists were working. Through his haki, he could sense whether or not he was being detected. Since he had entered the village using teleportation jutsu, the barrier had not been touched. And unlike the sensors, he truly had his haki that scanned every inch of the whole village. He could see where most of Konoha's ninjas were for the night. The Senju clan was packed with ninjas from many Umbu forces, making Minato deduce that they had been pulled from missions by the Land of Fire, precisely to be there. It was too much. And not only that, there were even more root ninjas spread across all the clans and engaged in conversations they were having with the leaders. Though there were 3 teams close to the other Umbu to capture Kushina. Some plans were being prepared, while at the same time, no ninja had been mobilized to support him. In other words, half the clans had been subdued, which was a bit frustrating. Well, so be it, Minato said with a smile, before disappearing, as he felt a gaze directed at him, the gaze of a Byakugan from kilometers away, but all it saw was the empty space he left atop Hashirama's head. He quickly moved to another spot in the village, finding a blind spot where he could continue investigating using haki. He clearly saw more than 100 members of the Hyuga clan monitoring the entire village. Even the Hyuga clan too, Minato remarked with an analytical look, before vanishing. What was that? A Hyuga clan ninja murmured. Did you see something? Another asked beside him. But I think I'm mistaken, man, he said in the end, not having seen Minato. Just a slight spatial disturbance when he looked. Minato was still lucky to have haki. All these techniques were hidden from everyone. Not even those closest to him knew how they fully worked. After all, he wasn't one to show off in his more than 12 years in this world. He had always been cautious about keeping his fruits, haki, and even many of his jutsus to use only when destroying an enemy. And certainly, Danzo and Hiruzen would qualify him as a monster if they knew he could have a technique no one else in the world could possess. His haki could combine all the best qualities of the dojutsu, without having a single special eye. To foresee the future, to feel everything around without looking, to sense presences even when being watched, or even the emotions of living beings. Observation haki was a major cheat for a ninja.
In any case, Minato had completed his surveillance before disappearing again, reappearing in the underground of the Senju clan, protected by powerful seals, in front of Tsunade, who was caught off guard upon seeing him appear next to a clone that was sitting.
"So you came,"
she said, raising her voice. "So that means you probably killed them all, right?" she asked.
"Yes, most of them. But I admit your friend Orochimaru is pretty hard to kill.
I fought him all afternoon and cut off his head several times, I think around 30 times.
But that damn snake keeps using substitution jutsu.
It's very likely I'll need to use something that harms his spirit rather than his physical body."
Minato began to complain, and just hearing that, Tsunade was already frowning. This brat thinks fighting Orochimaru is like a walk in the park? She couldn't help but think, unaware of Minato's next words, which would shock her even more.
I ended up leaving him there, to be surrounded by all the furious and hate-filled Suna ninjas after seeing a single Konoha ninja following the disaster I caused.
After I killed the Kazekage,
Minato informed, while Tsunade immediately widened her eyes.
"What did you do?" she exclaimed. "I killed Suna's Kazekage. Now they must be completely lost, without a Kage. That'll help as much as possible in the reinforcement against the Uzumakis." Minato said it naturally, while Tsunade displayed a rare expression of disbelief at what she was hearing from Minato. He had done a job worthy of Sasori. Maybe Minato would need him on the battlefield in the land of whirlpools. We'll discuss this later. Now to the current situation, we're completely surrounded. Minato began pulling out a map of the village, quickly placing pins in specific points.
There are Umbu ninjas from the Hokage en route, and also the Hyuga clan is working with the village leadership. Besides that, half the clans we talked to haven't moved, and they're positioned in a way that they won't get involved. And I don't know how many of the others who are already preparing to fight will actually be on our side or even become our enemies. I can only count on the Uchiha clan, which seems the most eager to act against the Hokage. The others, we'll see when the time comes," Minato said, while Tsunade already sensed this would happen, despite a bit of anger, knowing he was right at that moment. "Anyway, let's get ready." "Is your brother ready?" Minato asked. "Yes. Nawaki's been preparing all day. You just have to pull him in," she said, while Minato sat down, looking at the other clone he had kept in the village all day, focused. There, through the space-time jutsu, he would bring Nawaki, Hanabi, her grandfather, and also Tsuna and Makoto, leaving those who wouldn't fight safe and allowing them all to have a conversation together. Minato quickly made a seal and pulled Nawaki. He looked slightly surprised as he faced Minato, then smiled. "Are you okay?" he asked immediately. "Well, that was expected, he killed a Kage," Tsunade answered before Minato could. "A Kage?" Nawaki murmured, shocked. "Anyway, stay quiet, I'm going to summon the others now," Minato said. He then pulled Tsuna and Makoto in front of him using the seal. Makoto was surprised, quickly looking at Minato and smiling. "Minato! You're finally here!" She grabbed him, hugging him tightly, and kissed him. She pulled back a little and looked at Makoto. "How are you?" she asked. "My eyes still sting a bit, but I'll be fine." "Minato, it's a shame I won't be able to help you," she murmured, staring motionless at the ground. Minato shook his head. "Listen, silly girl. The village won't be a problem to deal with," Minato said and turned to Tsuna. "How's Kushina? There are at least 200 ninjas surrounding her by the main clan, did you speak with her?" Minato asked. "She's fine. Very focused, waiting for them to make their move." "Great. We just need to move Hanabi and her grandfather here now," he said, looking at the clone. In the next moment, Hanabi, his love, appeared, catching him by surprise, a normal reaction. Hanabi moved as soon as she saw him, and she threw herself into his arms, which he returned. "Are you sure this isn't dangerous?" the older man asked, cautiously. "We're doing this for your safety. We don't want you to be used as hostages."
In any case, Minato pulled the channel again. Minato looked at each of them. This small group would be the strength of the Senju clan. Now, just listen to my plan. Well, I need you to take care of the clan when they start their attack. I'm sure Kushina will deal with most of them. Suna will help her as well. Meanwhile, I'll go hunt Danzo directly. His security isn't good at the moment and it's a chance to eliminate him. Minato declared. Kill him? Tsunade couldn't help but raise an eyebrow, finally feeling exactly what she wanted to do. Even Nawaki looked disappointed at not being the one to get his revenge. Danzo is someone who has to be eliminated once and for all. He has too many contacts and too much influence, he'll do anything to escape punishment. So, I'd rather take the responsibility myself, even if it gets me expelled from the village or branded a traitor. But I will eliminate that guy, ironically, for the good of Konoha. Minato declared. You know I wanted a piece of him, Nawaki commented. Yeah, I figured you did. But don't worry, I'll handle him. So, wait for a signal. When a massive explosion happens, or when the ninjas around us start to attack, that's when we begin, understood? Minato said. Everyone responded, while he was about to move Nawaki and Suna. Hanabi grabbed his arm. Let me fight too, she asked. Minato looked at her. All right, was all he said. Quickly, he closed another hand seal, and Nawaki, Tsunade, and Hanabi vanished from the scene into the middle of the Senju clan. Only Makoto, his clone, Hanabi's grandfather, and Tsunade, who was still avoiding the battle, remained. The sensors outside could sense a disturbance. They felt the Senju clan members disappearing and reappearing out of nowhere, and grew worried. This is strange. What should we do? One of them asked. Inform the Hokage about this. They're teleporting. That means the yellow flash of Konoha is alive. The squad leader swallowed hard. Minato changed his clothes right there in hiding, putting on a black outfit instead of the white umbu uniform. He tightened everything he needed, and his sword rested at his waist. At last, Minato took action. He appeared in the closest place to where he had left his seal near the entrance to Route. He quickly advanced through the forest and would start right there, spotting a small cabin that marked Danzo's hidden entrance, while Minato could already feel the massive facility beneath him. As he had already made his intentions clear in Suna. He wouldn't be holding back here either. So, he quickly entered, punching the door and destroying the entrance with his hockey-covered fist, making a loud crash as he invaded the place. Though he didn't draw much attention from outside since Minato had already taken down the guards. Danzo stood still, surrounded by more than 20 ninjas he had handpicked for his protection. They didn't know how the enemy would act in Konoha or how many they really were, but it seemed like it would be an overwhelming victory for them. Yet they were surprised by the crash coming from outside. Danzo looked up, a cautious tone settling in his voice. What is that? He murmured, as his face began to darken. Chapter 275, Danzo. Third-person POV. Konoha, Year 42. A barrier had been created around the place, on top of the one already hidden there, but easily opened by Minato as soon as he arrived. He wouldn't let the chakra flow be detected by the ninjas responsible for surveillance around the village through chakra disturbances. The sound echoed through the rooms as the steel hatch simply slammed against the ground after Minato crushed it with a hockey-infused punch. The sound quickly echoed through the corridors, alerting everyone in the underground base. Minato only left 3 clones at the entrance to block the entry and exit of Route ninjas and landed in the middle of the corridor, his eyes showing he was in sage mode. He kept walking, placing one hand on the hilt of his sword at his waist, advancing through the place with calm steps. He began to sense all the ninjas moving toward him, but the base seemed silent, fitting for ninjas trained to be assassination weapons, as the only sound was his footsteps echoing there. Then, the first group of 8 Rutumbu ninjas appeared before him, looking surprised at Minato, since he was no longer hiding his face. Minato Namikaze in our base. You're here? The ninja murmured in surprise, as no chaos had yet begun in the village.
Until then, knowing they were still in position, no one had delivered another report, and the last one to come here had arrived 5 minutes ago saying everything was calm in the village. Seeing Minato there was certainly unsettling for them. "Yes, I'm here," Minato said, simply throwing a kunai at the group of ninjas. "Destroy that kunai immediately," they shouted, recognizing the symbol it bore. One of the Umbus, an Aburame, simply raised his hand, a swarm of insects emerging from his arm and advancing toward the kunai, intercepting it midair before it could get close to them. At the same time Minato, who had been on the other side, disappeared using Saru. The group was surprised to see him already running on the ceiling, upside down. "Ada," the ninja shouted, but didn't have time to finish the order. Minato simply drew his katana with Saru and moved to slice his neck, severing it, while the others were just starting to move, trying to strike or retreat. But Minato was fast, his body moving far better than the enemies, slashing a ninja to his right, then launching a forward cut so fast the target couldn't react, all while dodging a kunai from behind. He threw a kunai to the left before disappearing again, a shuriken flying through the spot he'd just been. He was already on the other side, cutting down 2 more men, throwing other kunai with his left hand and cutting down others with the katana in his right. It quickly became a massacre. Everything happened in an instant. In just a few seconds, the entire group was dead. Even those who tried to escape were caught by Minato. With the place full of bodies and blood, Minato remained there, waiting for the next group, who found the pile of corpses with the blonde holding his sword, which left them quite terrified. Minato didn't have a single drop of blood on his clothes, while all the stained walls and the entire floor were covered with a large amount of blood splattered around, kunai and shuriken scattered among the massed corpses, some of them headless. The ninjas saw Minato's neutral, indifferent gaze and soon saw him looking down, as they noticed a kunai lying near them. What happened in the next moment was a massacre, as Minato appeared slashing through the entire group before they could even use ninjutsu, relying solely on his speed and physical skill, using at most his teleportation. He kept walking down the corridor after killing the second group. They knew something was wrong, as all the groups that had been sent simply seemed to disappear. There was no explosion, no great battle, they just seemed to vanish like silent ghosts. Danzo was not pleased with this. He quickly left his room and went to the large space where the root ninjas trained and regrouped all those who still remained in the base, knowing there was an intruder present and a powerful one. His gaze fell on the entrance corridor, located at the top of that training room. There were still more than 15 root ninjas there, and Danzo couldn't help but feel frustrated. He didn't know who was coming, but he could sense a powerful chakra. He didn't recognize it as Minato's, due to the Sage mode, since his chakra was entirely composed of natural energy, confusing the sensors used to Minato's usual chakra. The corridor darkened and footsteps echoed from the entrance as Danzo narrowed his eyes. He hadn't expected anyone to attack him that night. Finally, the person began to emerge from the shadows of the corridor, revealing his blonde hair and an expression devoid of joy. Not even the usual smile he always wore remained on his face. Danzo saw Minato Namikaze there, with toad eyes, staring at him with a cold gaze. He survived. Danzo swallowed hard. He didn't show it outwardly, but inside he felt terrified when he looked into those eyes, fully aware of what they meant. Since when did he learn Sage mode? His thoughts slipped from his lips in a cautious tone. Minato walked forward until he stopped in front of the railing, looking down, ignoring all the ninjas. He only saw the old rival below. "You know, Danzo, you never really knew what my abilities were. Otherwise, you'd have known that all those measures you and Hiruzen set up against me would be useless in the end," Minato said. Danzo's face darkened, but he maintained his composure. "Do you know what you're doing, Minato Namikaze? Frankly, you're trying to assassinate me, aren't you? You want to steal the position of Hokage," he said, his tone full of hatred and disapproval. Certainly, the position of Hokage was a sensitive topic for Danzo, an ambitious pursuer of the title, to the point of being willing to destroy the very village and rebuild it just to attain it. "Is it me or you who wants to steal the Hokage title, Danzo?" Minato replied with a tone full of mockery. That idiot saw nothing beyond the idea of becoming Hokage. He believed that under his leadership, the village would force all others to submit. If that wasn't stupidity,
Minato didn't know what was. Especially coming from someone without actual skill.
Everything Danzo had ever acquired in life was through external powers, stolen from others. He believed that, once he became Hokage in the original timeline, he could use Shirsui's eye to control Konoha and thus dominate every war. But there were many glaring flaws in that plan, and Danzo was far too blind to see them. Minato didn't wait for Danzo to respond before stepping up onto the railing and leaping down to the lower platform, where all the root ninjas were preparing, falling into formation. He landed in place. "Attack and buy me time," Danzo ordered, beginning to unwrap the bandages from his arm. It was fast. One of the ninjas immediately threw a kunai, and Minato stood still, allowing it to hit him. The blade pierced his chest. "I got him?" The ninja shouted, surprised, as Minato kept his gaze steady, showing no sign of pain. In the next moment, a seal began to burn around the kunai and Minato's entire body exploded. Was that it? The others murmured, incredulous that they had killed Minato so easily. But as the smoke began to dissipate, it revealed what seemed impossible: 2 legs and a waist still standing, the upper half completely destroyed. However, instead of blood, there was light glowing from the upper part of what remained of his body. Everyone stood confused, even Danzo paused for a moment, staring at the sight. Suddenly, Minato's body began to reconstruct itself through the light, returning to the exact same position as before, looking at them as if nothing had happened. He could feel fear creeping into their hearts through his observation haki. "You gathered hundreds of ninjas in a trap-filled area outside the country today just to kill me. And you really think this will stop me?" Minato mocked. He quickly drew his sword and charged. The ninjas reacted, launching several jutsus, attacks from the Nara clan, the Aburame clan, and various elemental jutsus and abilities from other Konoha clans. Multiple attacks rushed toward Minato, who dodged or even allowed some to hit him without stopping, and with ease, he closed the distance to the group, beginning to cut down the first of them, further reducing the number of enemies. Danzo had to hurry as he removed the entire wrapping from his arm, revealing a Mokutan arm with 2 red eyes opening in the next moment. While he watched the last of the ninjas die, the area erupting in flames, earth, water, and wind as the jutsus began to dissipate. Minato looked at Danzo, his emotions betraying him as a desperate man. Minato's gaze fell on the Mokutan arm, a small smile forming on his face. "I didn't think your research had come this far. But it's still full of flaws, from what I can see here. It doesn't even compare to the arm Tsunade developed for her brother," Minato said as an observation. "You think you're getting out of here unpunished?" Danzo began. "You think the village will accept you attacking an elder?" "The village laws are clear." Danzo's words were the answer Minato needed. "Don't worry about that. I have more than enough proof against you, Danzo. So no, I don't think you're going to die here today as a hero of the village. Everyone will know your true face. Your crimes," Minato said firmly. "You know you can't defeat me." Minato had no problem speaking arrogantly to him. He had always wanted to put Danzo in his place. And now he had a good excuse to eliminate him without compromising his reputation in the village, as all the evidence had already been gathered. Danzo clenched his teeth and said nothing more. He simply began to form hand seals and quickly rushed at Minato without warning, drawing a kunai and throwing it at him. It was a kunai with a seal. Perhaps Danzo had already heard reports about the strange durability Minato's body displayed, and he seemed to be preparing for it. The kunai struck directly against Minato's chest, but simply shattered, its tip breaking. Danzo was surprised to see Minato's chest turning black where the kunai had hit, with a metallic sound, the thin layer preventing it from reaching his true body. "I'm not sure if that would have worked on me. But first you'll have to get through my armament haki," Minato mocked, before simply raising a finger to Danzo until it touched his own forehead. In the next moment, a lightning bolt burst out from behind Danzo's head, exploding, and he collapsed to the ground, dead. Chapter 276, The Strike Inside the Village begins. Third-person POV. Konoha, Year 42. A thud of a body hitting the ground echoed silently, while the flames and other elements still sizzled behind Minato. Minato kept his eyes fixed on Danzo's body for a few more seconds, in silence, while he remained on the ground, lifeless, with blood running from the first hole in his forehead to the larger hole behind it, destroying his brain. This guy was a bundle of problems the village needed to get rid of once and for all, and now he was there, lifeless, or at least that's what it seemed.
You know, Danzo. He began, I wonder. How long are you going to keep hiding back there thinking you can catch me off guard? Minato spoke calmly, still looking at the body that was starting to disappear. He could feel the look of shock as Danzo simply charged in a desperate attempt to catch him. He had managed to complete the Izanagi technique, which could alter the user's reality by sacrificing an eye for 60 seconds. It was a lifesaver. Thus, Danzo launched his attack on Minato. The kunai came straight for Minato's back while Minato seemed fully aware of what was happening around him, yet he didn't react to it and just stood still. However, Danzo's eyes widened when he saw the tip of the dagger simply explode upon contact with the black mark Minato had placed on his back. With a swift movement, Minato turned his body just to deliver a single strike. He simply slashed Danzo's neck with a quick motion of his sword, and blood sprayed everywhere. For the second time, Danzo fell dead. Outside of the root hideout, the village was quite agitated. The Hokage, upon receiving the report of strange movements, furrowed his brow upon learning that Minato had escaped and survived the attack, and was now in the village. He quickly got ready, putting on his outfit and helmet, with 2 more teams at his side. I want to be informed of everything happening in the village and any movements from the clans. If we need to act, we'll have to go into battle, he said with regret, while believing the village's safety depended on these actions. Hiruzen still had a furrowed brow with Minato appearing in the village tonight. He hadn't imagined the boy could have survived that attack. He thought in frustration, unaware that Minato had eliminated almost everyone. Since Orochimaru had been with them in the ambush teams, Minato must have used his teleportation to escape, and they had no idea of the chaos Minato had created within the Land of Wind. He simply waited in the building, while both the Sarutobi clan and the Shimura clan were ready to act in favor of the leaders. He hoped Danzo would soon join him so they could eliminate this threat together once and for all. It looked like Konoha was in for a turbulent night. At the same time, all the Anbu began receiving communications from the Hokage. While some delivered reports to Danzo in his hideout, moving toward him at that moment, others were already planning to act, with Danzo having already demanded the abduction of the Jinchuriki, advancing directly toward the Senju clan. The Root Anbu had an easy time entering Senju territory, as they appeared directly in the houses, both Tsunade's and Kushina's. Get ready. On my signal, one Anbu said in front of Kushina's house. But before they could advance, the door began to open, and the girl calmly stepped out, wearing her kunoichi outfit and even a jonin vest from Minato himself. Her hair was tied in a ponytail, and she wore the Konoha forehead protector. Kushina was perfectly dressed like a jonin of the village. So, you're here to kidnap me? I can't say I don't have unpleasant experiences like that, Kushina began angrily, remembering the time she was taken from the village by Kumo ninjas and nearly brought to the Land of Lightning. If it weren't for Minato back then, she would have had a very different fate. But this time, she would act differently, staring at the men with a cold look. And before anyone could say anything, suddenly, an explosive sound came from the other side, catching their attention. Inside the house where Tsunade and her family lived, someone was thrown out, hitting the ground near the entrance and exploding shortly after. At the door, a fist appeared, quickly followed by a kick, and someone stepped out. It was Tsuna, now showing herself with her face partially covered by some bands over her eyes, reminiscent of Hashirama's Sage Mode, but a little different. It wasn't as powerful, but still, it was Sage Mode. What no one understood was that she seemed to be using some kind of special technique. At the same time, Nawaki and Hanabi also appeared at the entrance of the house, staring at the root groups who were preparing to attack them. Do you have any idea what you're doing invading Senju property? Nawaki stepped forward as he clenched his fist. His Mokutan-infused arm began to mold itself, getting used to it in preparation for the fight. Groups quickly began to appear behind the enemies, both in front of Tsunade's house and Kushina's, filling the area in a matter of seconds. Attention! All Konoha shinobi, these are criminals attempting a coup in Konoha. They must be met with lethal force. The local Umbu themselves had given the orders.
It wasn't just Root's team anymore, but everyone who had been mobilized there. Several members of the Hyuga clan also began to appear, moving in to assist the Hokage's shinobi. At the same time, in the center of the village, the Uchiha clan was about to act. Mazu Uchiha was watching the group of soldiers, all ready to win that night, as he received a report from Minato informing him that it was time to get ready.
Remember.
At the signal, we advance, he said, while everyone felt, behind him, dozens of Sharingan activating, ready for battle. Elsewhere, in the Hatake clan, its only member was preparing, already sensing several ninjas around the walls. As he began to walk toward the clan entrance.
Dad?
Suddenly, he heard a voice and stopped. His son was behind him, seeing him from the back with the sword over one shoulder, like Tsukumo used to wear his clothes in the old days. Tsukumo looked with complicated feelings at the sword above his shoulder, while seeing Kakashi holding a kunai, almost getting into combat stance.
The Hokage gave me a mission, Dad.
A mission to try to stop you before you did something stupid against the village, Kakashi murmured.
Kakashi, we are not trying to overthrow the village, on the contrary, we want to return to our values, so the village is not destroyed by itself.
Tsukumo said with a serious and melancholic tone at the same time.
What do you mean by that?
Kakashi asked.
The village is in serious trouble, son.
It seems to be fleeing from its old values.
Tonight we will be seeking them again. That's why I'm here to fight for them.
I hope you don't mind, but your father intends to sacrifice himself once again on a mission, seeking the good of his comrades, he said, while Kakashi looked at him stunned. At first, he wanted to step forward, face his father, and stop him from doing stupid things, from being acclaimed once again as the village's enemy.
However, he did not.
He remembered the words of a certain blonde boy who had spoken, unlike everything others said about his father. His phrases kept echoing in Kakashi's head.
I'm going, son. I wish you would stay home.
I'm doing this because the Hokage is talking about your mission as protector of the village, he said seriously, and Kakashi stood there, paralyzed, watching his father simply disappear. The moment he left the walls, several kunai quickly began to fly toward him and several Umbu ninjas emerged from the shadows. Tsukumo drew his swords and began to defend all the blows, while the ninjas disappeared. He dodged the first attack and hit the enemy with the sword's hilt on the head, knocking him down, while advancing against the others. Kakashi stood there, paralyzed, watching all the movement outside.
He couldn't take a step.
The Nara clan was also gathered in the courtyard, with Shikaku watching everyone. The Hokage had spoken with them, but Shikaku's father did not yield. Still, he prepared his troops, who began to position themselves to advance. The same could be said of the Yamanaka and Akimichi clans, who were also gathered. And also the Inazuka clan, who did not yield to the Hokage's pressure. The Aburame clan was in full gear.
8 entire clans would still fight for Minato's convictions.
Even the Uchiha clan was with Minato, tired of the injustice created by the village.
Meanwhile, in the Senju clan's underground, Minato's clone was still focused, in lotus position, eyes closed, with grandfather Hanabi, Makoto, and Tsunade there.
That place was still kept out of the war that was about to happen.
Then, the signal came with a huge explosion, right at the Senju clan.
While the whole village suddenly heard a deafening echo, everyone who was living their routine normally looked toward the explosion, wondering what was happening. Even the civilian ninjas were confused. No one there had any idea that a series of events that had never happened in the village since its foundation would begin that night, with clans turning against the Hokage and their elders, trying to change a village decision, even if it resulted in another war. Inside the Root hideout, a battle continued to happen.
Meanwhile, Minato took a few steps back, having fun.
He grabbed some ninja stars with his hands, already spinning them between his fingers, while blowing, creating a cutting chakra around them. One in each hand, he threw them forward, while other stars with the same chakra shape advanced, colliding with each other. Danzu was having a lot of difficulty fighting Minato, looking very worried at his eye, with the first finally closing. He only had the other in hand as a last resort, while Minato responded to each of his jutsus equally.
He was as skilled, or even more, with the wind element than Danzu, which was frustrating, since the latter prided himself on being one of the greatest wind chakra specialists in the world. But Minato proved to be even better. Minato left Danzu for a moment and looked to the side, finally feeling the explosion at the Senju clan. He smiled. "Well, it looks like it started," he said. All the clans finally began to move, as Tsukumo had predicted. Quickly, the Uchiha, Nara, Yamanaka, Akimichi, Inuzuka, and Aburame ninjas left their clans, advancing through the village, while being confronted by Umbus who were there trying to contain them. "I'm going to have to end this quickly," Minato thought. He looked at his opponent with murderous intentions. Hiruzen frowned as he stood atop the Hokage tower, looking worried. He quickly began making hand seals, summoning his monkey, preparing with full strength for what was about to happen that night. At the same time, in the Senju clan, several ninjas were startled to see a huge hole in front of Kushina's house, with more than a dozen ninjas defeated in an instant. Everyone looked surprised as the dust began to settle, and a girl with a golden aura began to appear, making everyone astonished. "It can't be, that's the chakra of the Kyuubi." Those who had been there to protect Kushina for years and prevent the seal from breaking, so the chakra wouldn't leak, were shocked, while the girl seemed to have total control of the chakra. How did she develop that, and when? Chapter 277, Konoha Civil War 01. Third-person POV. Konoha, Year 42. Earth-style jutsu. Nawaki began forming a sequence of hand seals. Earth golems. The ground trembled as 3 stone humanoids emerged like 4-meter giants in a corner of the Senju estate. Nawaki cast his jutsu in front of him to shield himself from the dozens of kunai and shuriken flying his way, creating a wall to protect himself, the weapons clashing against the golems without causing much damage. Nawaki made his next move and clasped both hands together. The golems began advancing toward the Umbu ninjas fighting him. On the other side, near Nawaki, Suna began forming several hand seals. The space around him started to grow more humid, transforming the very atoms in the air into water before forming a tornado around him and blasting forward with a massive wave of water. It was a jutsu of Tobarama, one of many Tsuna had added to his arsenal of water-style jutsu, attacking the groups of ninjas on the other side. At the same time, a group of Umbu quickly began forming simultaneous earth-style seals, creating a massive wall for defense. But the wave, infused with Senjutsu chakra, was more powerful. It quickly overwhelmed them, hitting the ninjas behind the wall, who barely had time to react, crushed by the force of the water. On Nawaki's side, the golems were fighting against the Umbu on the other side as the enemies began launching explosive kunai, blasting various parts around them and tearing limbs apart. Nawaki stood firm, controlling the golems to defeat that group of ninjas, while some were finally caught. Some ninjas managed to get past the golems as Tsuna's jutsu began spreading throughout the area. Nawaki saw more kunai coming his way and took advantage of the water to create a wall jutsu. After forming the seals, the water wall defended against the attacks, with the kunai exploding with paper bombs but without injuring him. The water Tsuna had created kept growing toward them as it spread, and Nawaki took even more advantage of it. He began making several hand seals for a water-style jutsu. The water quickly rose and began pulling water dragons from right there, sending them against the enemies. As the dragon's roar echoed, earth explosions clashed in combat. Other attacks tried to strike the dragons but were repelled as Nawaki summoned more of them. Sounds of chains began to rise from the other side of the clan grounds, where Kushina was. With full control, several units were caught by surprise, seized by chains coming from Uzumaki's back glowing golden in Kurama mode version 1. She's so strong. That thought fell over the Jounin who, in an instant, were all caught by dozens of chains without being able to react, lifted into the air. She's absorbing our chakra. They soon realized, as Kushina used the adamantine chains to weaken them all. Minato had developed a Fuinjutsu that drained the enemy's jutsu and taught it to Kushina, allowing her to use it through her chains to recover chakra. In less than 30 seconds, she had already defeated more than 36 elite Umbu from the village, leaving many unconscious. After completely draining their chakra reserves, with them collapsing to the ground unconscious,
the chains began to return to her back as she stared at a few more Ambu squads that had stayed away from the fight, observing her with caution and fear. There was no doubt, to everyone's shock, Kushina was able to control the fox's chakra and had multiplied her powers several times over. Kushina stood still, facing them, waiting for them to attack. At the same time, more explosions erupted from Nawaki's dragons, continuing to strike his enemies. Fire style, fireball jutsu. On Suna's side, a group of 4 ninjas prepared to attack Tsunade's daughter from the other side, spitting flames. Meanwhile, Suna quickly performed a sequence of seals. Water style, water wall jutsu. She created another wall, preventing the flames from advancing, protecting herself as she waited for them to stop their attack. And as soon as they did, she simply burst out from the water, charging at full speed toward the group of ninjas, who didn't even have time to react to her velocity. Using only brute strength, the first felt his bones crushed with ease. She had to be careful, as she didn't intend to kill anyone by accident. She quickly advanced on the rest of the enemies using only taijutsu, without giving them a chance to react. Suna already had naturally strong physical power, due to training with her mother and learning her techniques, but senjutsu made her multiple times faster and stronger. Nawaki also stopped casting jutsu as the enemies approached, launching kunai and other jutsu at him. But Nawaki was caught off guard when one of the enemies managed to unleash a jutsu, using the earth beneath him to create a coffin that began to enclose him completely. And when they thought he had been caught by the combined earth-style jutsu, he literally exploded out of the wall with brute force alone, bursting forth and surprising his enemies with a green aura surrounding him. Nawaki had opened the 6th gate and charged at the enemies using only his body. This was the result of his training with Might Due. With a body naturally suited for the 8 gates technique, he managed to master it in just 1 year, up to the 6th gate. Nawaki had enthusiastically told Minato that he could already open the 6th gate, while Minato had been pleased and asked about Due. Nawaki eventually said that Due was already at the 7th gate, as he had shown, but Minato suspected that Might Due had already mastered the 8th. And although he had never said anything, Minato would never question him. After all, opening that final gate brought enormous consequences. Despite its raw power, the cost was inevitable. The battles continued within the Senju clan. Meanwhile, Hamura Mitokado and Koharu Udatane were somewhere in the village, gathering more than 1,000 civilians and explaining the situation, while the shinobi in front of them looked somewhat lost and grim in the face of their statements. A coup d'etat is happening tonight, and multiple clans are united to overthrow the village leadership and drag it into war. That left the village's ninjas grim and worried. That's why we must stop them, Hamura said as he finished, just as explosions began to erupt in the distance, echoing throughout the village. It seems it's already begun. That's why we need everyone to support and try to bring them down. Any sighting of Minato Namikaze must be reported. He is a great traitor and we must stop the clans. Are we clear? Koharu said as she could hear the murmuring around her. Despite the conflict forming around the village hero with the accusations, there was also determination in the eyes of many. They quickly moved out, heading toward the confrontation with the clans. As the clan and all of Minato's allies continued advancing through the village, people quickly noticed, beyond the explosions and the glowing light left by jutsus that drew everyone's eyes toward the center of the village, the movement of large groups advancing in combat formation. They were entire clans. Hiruzen narrowed his eyes at everything that was happening, while his gaze was already locked on the Senju clan approaching him. Being very close to the Hokage building, it wasn't hard to see what was happening. Jutsus were being unleashed, with countless flashes. On one side, there was a golden kunoichi, on the other, someone cloaked in green, while the last had no glow at all. It went around hitting and knocking down every enemy like a ragdoll. But the most disturbing thing he felt was the fox's chakra approaching. How could he not recognize that? It was malevolent in itself. And he advanced, while seeing most of his Umbu cautious to enter the battlefield, even though they were elite ninjas. They were afraid. Hiruzen caught their attention as he approached, with more teams behind him, while all kneeled before him. "What's the situation?" he asked, as he glanced at the aftermath of the battle. They began to explain, while his gaze fell directly upon Kushina, her body glowing.
She's mastered the fox's chakra.
He sounded skeptical.
How? When? He asked himself those questions, stunned. When had Kushina done that? How had she done it?
There was never any report of her leaving her house, with rare exceptions after her kidnapping. She had always been watched, and no one had ever noticed anything strange about her.
Let alone sensing the fox's chakra.
That shouldn't be something she could do easily there, not without being detected. And, from what Hiruzen clearly saw now, the girl had calm eyes as their eyes met. Obviously, she was already used to using that power, which made Hiruzen question even more what was going on.
How could this be happening? He was lost in the dark, and being without information. He understood that was fatal. At another time, he would have considered it a blessing for the village.
A Jinchuriki who could control the power of the fox and no longer needed to be contained as a weapon of war, but rather a companion who would fight alongside them to protect her friends. He felt a strong inclination to prefer that. But now, with all this chaos here, there was no way he could say he was happy about it.
Quite the opposite.
It made her his enemy, and made things even worse for him with her standing beside those who were opposing his decisions.
But Hiruzen swallowed hard and looked ahead, determined. Stay here.
I want to speak with Kushina, he said, advancing with Enma at his side, landing on the wall.
Meanwhile, Kushina stood there, still glowing with chakra burning like a flaming cloak.
It wasn't phase 2 yet, but it was certainly powerful enough to surpass Kage level. Kushina crossed her arms as she stared at Hiruzen with narrowed eyes.
Hokage.
I was wondering when you'd finally show up, she said in a tone far from friendly.
Kushina, since when?
Since when have you been able to control the power of the nine-tailed fox? He at least wanted to know, searching for some answer to his countless questions, even though it now seemed they were enemies.
I trained. Kurama and I came to an agreement, Kushina answered.
Even though he's pretty frustrating at times, we talked. We're trying to become friends, she said as she felt the fox snorting inside her. She ignored it and kept her eyes on Hiruzen.
But
the old man still couldn't understand how she could have done all that here.
It was thanks to Minato.
We did it outside the village, without you noticing.
There was no reason to hide it anymore. Minato helped me deal with Kurama.
You could say it's thanks to him that we now work together, she said as she saw Hiruzen's gaze harden.
That girl?
She was showing her loyalty to Minato above anything else. It was obvious now that she favored him over the village.
That could no longer be denied. Kushina, what you're doing is wrong. I ask that you think of the village.
Your home, Hiruzen then argued. And I do, Hiruzen, Kushina replied firmly.
Konoha will always be my home. It's where I grew up.
I lived the best part of my life here. I made friends, fell in love, became who I am today. And I would never harm it, that's my word.
However, I know that you betrayed the Uzumaki clan.
You handed them over like cattle to the slaughter. And Minato is trying to fix that, trying to correct the mistakes you yourselves created.
That's why I'm fighting by his side.
Against you, Hiruzen, and your elder companions.
We don't need to go that far, Kushina.
I'm sure we can talk, Hiruzen tried to say. Obviously, the situation was becoming very difficult for him.
If Kushina truly could master the chakra of the nine-tailed fox, things were already far too dire.
Having to deal with Minato was already a problem, but with more people that powerful, especially when one of them was a war machine. Kushina, a voice called out beside them, as someone landed nearby, leaving Hiruzen wide-eyed, stunned to see Tsuna, with several black markings across her body after having defeated all the enemies, while Nawaki was still finishing off the last ones. She stared at Hiruzen, while he was left speechless at the sight of Sannin mode, recognizing it immediately, and realizing that his situation was not getting any easier.
Don't worry, Tsuna.
I'll deal with him, Kushina's voice returned, while Hiruzen looked at her hand, where a glowing blue sphere shimmered with spinning streaks around it. She was looking at him like an enemy, the sphere in hand. Hiruzen immediately took a defensive stance, knowing exactly what was about to happen.
He prepared himself with Enma at his side. But Kushina had already vanished, reappearing in front of him before he could react, striking him with the Rasengan right in the center of his stomach. Chapter 278, Konoha Civil War 02. Third-person POV. Konoha, Year 42. Hokage-sama. The ANBU team was stunned when the Hokage was attacked at a speed no one could react to in time, while the old village leader was bent backward before being sent flying. He flew in a straight line at high speed while his body spun with the Rasengan in his chest, exploding against the compound wall. Hiruzen! Enma shouted upon seeing his companion fall like that and immediately tried to fight the girl there, transforming once again into the Monkey King. Kushina looked to the side as the monkey tried to strike her with blows. She quickly dodged the animal with ease, who couldn't keep up with her in Kurama's chakra mode. She dodged the first attacks before kicking Enma, who flew like a bullet to the ground, exploding upon impact with his own body. Kushina landed shortly after, watching the dust and dirt rise in front of her. Suna approached, landing beside her, while looking over the area full of fallen ninjas. She had defeated at least 40 people there, just by using her adamantine chains and draining the enemy's chakra. "You didn't even hesitate to strike the Hokage," Suna said with a satisfied smile. "I bet you let out all your frustrations for him having locked you away in that house for years." She added. "You bet I did, Databane." Kushina didn't lie, she held resentment toward that old man, along with the other 3 elders. The ANBU immediately rushed to the destroyed wall and retrieved the injured Hokage. The middle part of his armor was broken, his stomach injured by the Rasengan. He was still conscious but clearly very hurt, with blood dripping from his lips. The Hokage was in immense pain, looking toward where Kushina and Suna stood in front of the hole. He saw Enma coming out of it, but chains began to wrap around him before he could escape. Kushina restrained him with her adamantine chains and slammed him back to the ground. That was enough for him to simply turn into smoke and disappear. "This is bad, she's incredibly powerful." The thought came filled with fear for the Hokage as he watched the situation unfold. "Hokage-sama. The medical ninjas will treat you," the ANBU said while landing at a distance, with ninjas using medical ninjutsu to heal the damage. "I want a report," the Hokage demanded. "Hokage-sama. A large number of ninjas is coming from one side. They are civilian ninjas and reinforcements from the elders, but there are also hundreds of ninjas coming from the other side. They're clan ninjas. We can identify them." He began to speak, recognizing many of the chakras. "So the Uchiha, the Nara, the Yamanaka, the Akimichi, the Inuzuka, the Aburame, the Hatake clan, and the Senju clan are against us," he murmured in frustration. He had personally spoken with some of the clans, keeping a political conversation about non-accusation, but asking, knowing their plans, that the village wouldn't allow them to start a civil war, and to think about how that would weaken Konoha's position to its enemies. It seems many of them still rose to fight alongside Minato. "Hokage-sama." A group of Hyuga clan ninjas arrived at that moment to reinforce. "Keep tracking our enemies' positions," the Hokage ordered while the Hyuga nodded before opening their eyes, just as the sensors became alarmed. "The Uchiha are here," they announced, as a large number of ninjas began to appear around them, their eyes glowing red, filled with blood. "They're Sharingans. Prepare for battle," announced the ANBU as several Hyugas also appeared, ready to fight. "Hokage." One of the Uchiha stepped forward, standing on the rooftops, staring at Hiruzen. "Mazu Uchiha, so you wish to betray the village? After everything?" Hiruzen clenched his teeth. "We are not betraying the village, we're just tired of being treated like criminals by you and the other elders. You find a rogue Uchiha ninja at the border and punish us for it, how can we stay silent?" he began with a very serious tone. "Today you're sacrificing the Uzumaki clan, tomorrow it will be the Uchiha clan. I expect nothing less from you and your companions. We're doing this exactly for a better Konoha," Mazu said, causing all the Uchihas behind him to nod in agreement. No one there wanted anything less than for Konoha to be a place to grow, not be treated like criminals, as they had been in recent months. "We can reach an agreement. Hiruzen murmured, though he didn't truly believe it would happen. So, shall we protect the Uzumaki clan and go to war? Not that Mazu and the other Uchihas had any great love for the Uzumaki clan. After all, they were affiliated with the Senju clan, their old rival since the Warring States era. But they were defending an idea. After all, if they turned their backs today, they could be the next ones in the future. Minato had made that very clear and firmly believed the Uchiha clan was doomed to destruction in a few years, and that the village would be behind it. We can't, Hiruzen said, frustrated. He wondered where Danzo was at that moment. He needed him. The calculation of enemy forces was way off, and the problem wasn't the clans, but rather users like Kushina controlling the Kyuubi's chakra, and Suna having Sage Mode. Minato hadn't even appeared yet. He was also a problem, and there was no location on him anywhere, just signs that he was using his teleportation jutsu around the village. Hiruzen's gaze shifted from the Senju clan back to Mazu and the other Uchihas. There was no point trying to stall. They had to act, with the clans approaching faster than the civilian reinforcements. Prepare to face the Uchiha clan, he gave the order as all the ANBU and members of the Hyuga clan readied themselves for battle. How are things over there? Nawaki appeared where Kushina and Suna were. Everything's under control. The Hokage is gathering forces, but the Uchiha clan just arrived. Soon, the Aburame, Nara, and Inazuka clans will be approaching too. Kushina said, easily sensing all the chakras. We need to protect the area where Mother is with the others. Suna turned her attention to her uncle, who nodded. Where's Minato? Any sign of him? Nawaki asked, looking intently at the ninjas watching them from outside. But no one came closer after they had already defeated over 100 of them. No. Minato must be inside a distant barrier, but I can feel his spiritual aura. He still seems to be dealing with Danzo. Kushina said. What's the difference between that and chakra? Suna asked curiously, glowing beside her. It's different. Chakra is spiritual energy and can be unique to each person, but it's still energy. The soul is different, it's unique to the body. It generates chakra, but it's never altered. I can feel that from Minato and even some of you. I can't say exactly where he is, but I know whether he's near or far, and roughly in which direction. Kushina explained. Then we'll have to wait a little longer, he'll be here soon. Nawaki said. And what are we supposed to do with the huge number of ninjas coming this way? Suna said, looking back and seeing more than 1,000 ninjas approaching them. We fight. Kushina said, climbing onto the house she lived in, landing on the roof where she could see the massive wave of ninjas jumping from rooftop to rooftop toward them. Suna landed at her side. Can you do Raisengans? Kushina asked. I haven't mastered it yet. I was focused on other things. Suna said with a bit of embarrassment. Minato had shown her how to do it a week ago, but she barely had time to train and master the technique. I see, let's try not to destroy too much of the village. Kushina said in the end, after all, Suna had large-scale jutsus tied to her two elements. Alright, I can fight using only taijutsu and sage mode. Suna replied, and the two of them prepared to face the first of the 1,000 approaching ninjas. Sounds of battle and explosions began to erupt behind them, with light flashing across the sky as the Uchihas and the Hokage's ninjas began to clash using jutsus. I think I just had an idea. Kushina said suddenly, while Suna looked slightly confused. Kushina made two clones, both using the same Kurama cloak, and advanced to the front, toward the entrance of the clan. Both clans aligned between her and the 1,000 clones. The Senju clan's Fuinjutsus had already fallen from the walls, so they could now enter easily through there. The three new clans also appeared where the Hokage was to assist the Uchihas at that moment. Meanwhile, elsewhere. The sound of someone collapsing and kneeling before putting a hand to their mouth. Then coughing up blood as it poured through his fingers. Danzo was dying, his eyes wide in fear as he looked at Minato from a distance, filled with frustration. No. I can't die here. I can't die, he told himself, refusing to accept it. He had to save the village. He had to destroy Minato and his plan. Minato was someone who would bring Konoha's destruction. No one was better suited to govern the village than him. He would not let this happen. Then, he fell to the ground dead. Minato stood there, completely fine. No matter what Danzo threw at him, it was all useless. He was now far too powerful, even to the point of coating his body with haki and letting himself be hit by many of Danzo's attacks, without even resorting to using the intangibility of his Logia fruit. You gave up? Minato looked up as the Danzo on the ground vanished and the real one reappeared in the distance. Perfectly fine, but with a look full of frustration. Danzo was there, not knowing what to say as he saw Minato smiling while looking at his arm. Danzo looked at his last Sharingan closing completely. This, he murmured as he turned his gaze to Minato once more. This isn't going to happen, he said as he removed the bandage from his eye. So you're going to use your last eye. Minato saw this and slightly widened his eyes when he saw the Sharingan. A Manjikyu? Minato said as he felt a shift. He was entering a genjutsu. He could have escaped, but didn't. He felt that this genjutsu wasn't as powerful as Itachi's Tsukuyomi. Whose eye was this? Minato thought as the reality around him began to change. Suddenly, he found himself bound by chains while Danzo stood in front of him, staring with a calm look, as if he were finally in control of the situation. I must admit, this was my last resort against you. Danzo began. I'm impressed. Minato said, still bound by chains, looking at Danzo calmly. Release. Danzo said, forming a hand seal before turning his gaze back to Minato. Physical attacks don't work on you at all. Only sealing and mental attacks. But you're too skilled in Fuinjutsu to be caught by one. That failed mission only confirmed it. Either way, your weakness lies in the mind, he said, seeming satisfied with his conclusions. That's what you say, Danzo. Either way, let's end this. Minato spoke. A sword pierced Minato's chest, then another, and another, each one going through him. But Minato didn't care and kept his focus. Danzo didn't understand how his body worked. He had never seen anything like it, and it was frustrating that even inside a genjutsu, Minato surpassed the ability to feel pain. He was about to begin something when he noticed something coming. Minato's body began to release an energy full of yellow lightning. You think you can lock the will of a king inside this place? Minato mocked. He had found a way to unleash his conqueror's haki, and it would be interesting to see what he could do in this moment. Danzo only widened his eyes before a wave of Conqueror's haki exploded from Minato's body, distorting all of space as it looked like he was breaking it apart. Danzo stepped back in fear. Then suddenly found himself back at his base, and before he could react, someone appeared in front of him and yanked the eye straight from his face, causing him to scream in pain. I'll take this eye, and I appreciate that you didn't use a Izanagi on it, it would have been a waste. Minato said, looking at the Manjikyu Sharingan in his hand. It could belong to no one other than Kagami Uchiha, the student of the second Hokage, just like Danzo and Hiruzen, since he knew the boy had awakened the Manjikyu. Danzo must have taken it for himself at some point, given how greedy he was after their sensei died. He ignored the elder screaming in pain on the floor, trying to stop the hemorrhage from having an eye ripped out, while storing the eye in another container. Chapter 279, Konoha Civil War 03. Third-person POV. Konoha, Year 42. HHH. The sound echoed through the place as Danzo was trying to stop his bleeding. He clenched his teeth while lifting his head slightly to see what Minato was doing, giving the boy who stole his eye his deadliest and most hate-filled glare. Minato stored the container with the eye and looked back at Danzo with that same hateful stare. You seem to hate me, he mocked. Minato. Perhaps Minato had never heard his name spoken with such hatred as it was in that moment. You really thought you could have handled me all along? He took his first steps toward Danzo. You must be eliminated, for the good of the village. Danzo growled, as his body unconsciously dragged itself backward. Nice words, you must know you're at the end of your life, right? Minato was getting closer and closer, stepping through the trail of blood left by Danzo himself. "I won't die here," Danzo proclaimed as he began to rise upon feeling the fear of death taking over him, and he started running with Minato walking behind him. He didn't get far from Minato as he ran toward one of the hallways. Before he could even reach it, a cold blade passed through Danzo's legs and he was dismembered right then and there, losing his balance and falling to the ground. The pain came shortly after, as his gaze lifted with his one remaining eye to see his legs, or rather, the absence of them, while Minato stood less than a meter away from him. Ah! Minato was surprised at Danzo's desperation. He remembered the man having more dignity when he was killed by Sasuke. Here, he looked like a frightened dog, whining in pain. "Let's finish this." Minato wasted no time and was soon on top of Danzo. The fight was anything but difficult. Danzo didn't even have his summoning, as he hadn't obtained it and never would. After all, Hanabi had claimed it before him. Even so, Danzo was nothing more than an elite jonin with a few extra tricks. And for Minato, dealing with him was easier than the more than 8 squads he had taken down before returning to Konoha. "No. I can't die here." Danzo ignored the pain, driven by fear as he saw Minato pulling the sword above him. He quickly formed hand signs at instant speed, ready to unleash some jutsu in his desperation. Just as he was about to complete them, Minato moved his blade like lightning, and both of Danzo's hands were cut off mid-sign. They flew off and blood spurted across Danzo's body. That was his death sentence. There was no way out now, and all he could see between his severed hands was Minato's gaze, cold and lifeless. Danzo knew he was going to die there. He accepted it, finally. "I'll take you with me," he screamed with a blood-covered face, coughing up even more blood, as his body began to emit several Fuinjutsu symbols. Minato remained silent the entire time, fully aware that something was coming for him. "Die," he shouted, his eyes showing him performing his final act for the village of Konoha, remembering the times he and Hiruzen trained alongside their fellow companions, and later, how they did everything to protect Konoha, in their own way, of course. That glimmer faded when the tip of Minato's blade pierced his neck, causing Danzo's eyes to freeze. His final second of life was utter shock as the sword buried in his neck began to move, slicing through the remaining flesh. Everything happened in an instant, as Danzo's head flew off his body, bouncing several meters like a ball before falling lifeless, still with his eyes showing a man who died in shock. The Fuinjutsu lines on Danzo's body began to disappear one by one, all vanishing, while Minato raised an eyebrow. He didn't even need to leave the place. Danzo's body was intact in the end. He looked at Danzo's head inside. It seemed like everything had finally ended. There was no one else alive in that base, and his clones maintaining the barrier had held back any ninja trying to enter the place. "Let's see how the others are doing," he murmured as he closed his eyes, quickly beginning to scan the village. The Senju clan was holding off most of the forces, while more clans than he initially imagined were answering his call. He knew things were going well and didn't seem to be in a hurry just yet. He needed to take care of this place first. Minato summoned more than 40 clones in the next moment. "I want all the evidence and scrolls from this base collected. Bring me everything while I deal with the ninjas outside trying to get in. Don't leave anything behind that we can use as proof. I also want to know what kind of research Danzo was conducting and learn about the Mokuton experiments, because I doubt it was just about creating arms." Minato instructed the clones. They all nodded and began spreading out, advancing through the base in search of the evidence Minato requested. He left one clone to collect Danzo's main body, while Minato took the head to hide it in a separate location, sealing it away. He headed outside shortly after, while the clones passed through room after room, retrieving the bodies of dead Uzumakis, research scrolls, and even the corpses of children used in Roots experiments, children from their own village. Danzo was dead now and had received what he deserved, but Minato couldn't help but feel enraged about it. He was soon at the hatch he had broken through to enter, now emerging inside the small house. "How are things?" Minato asked the clones stationed there, holding the barrier in place. He had created this barrier differently. Rather than having 4 clones at each side, he placed one in the center. It was weaker than the other version but still strong enough to withstand Jonin-level attacks for 20 minutes since he had entered.
"They're about to break the barrier," said the clone maintaining it.
"It's fine. Leave the rest to me, you can help too."
Minato allowed the barrier to drop as he already had 2 clones prepared to fight off anyone who came close. "We're almost through the barrier," shouted a root ninja, noticing the cracks after throwing several kunai with explosive tags. They had found the barrier suspicious and quickly understood that root might be under attack. Still, destroying the barrier had proven difficult, which was worrying, until this moment. Together, one of them shouted, and a group of 12 ninjas, an entire squad, launched dozens of explosive kunai at the barrier. As the explosions began, the echo was so loud the entire village could hear it, while the barrier cracked more and finally shattered. Like breaking glass, it was heard as it splintered apart. "Prepare to invade," the leader ordered as dust filled the air. At the same time, a slicing sound came from within the smoke and appeared before the ninjas, who couldn't react properly.
It was a kunai. "That's..."
One of them barely dodged, but they knew something was wrong when they saw the kunai had a marking. Still, it was too late to guess what it meant. Minato appeared at that moment and kicked the ninja in the head with such force that the sound of his neck snapping echoed. His companions were stunned and prepared to fight, but within the same explosion smoke, several kunai flew toward the group, catching them by surprise. Though some managed to react in time, a few were hit, crying out in pain. "It's him," one of them shouted as Minato had already taken down 3 more, flying between the kunai, all of them marked.
Those root ninjas couldn't do anything but watch their group be wiped out in an instant, as Minato teleported through the dozens of kunai in the air until he eliminated the last one. He landed on the ground, ignoring the falling bodies around him, and returned to the clones in the small house. It had been them who threw the kunai using the shadow clone jutsu. He said nothing else and waited for the clones to come out of the base with scrolls containing everything they had recovered. It didn't take long before the scrolls were brought to him. When the last clone handed it over, Minato knew the base had been cleared. It would be better to leave the evidence there, but they might try to destroy it all by burying the entire base, so it was best to have it in hand when he presented Danzu's crimes. At the same time, the base itself would be useful. He then left his clones to guard the place. With everything resolved, he turned his gaze toward the village, while the sounds of explosions echoed in the distance. He could feel Konoha's population falling into chaos with the noise of battle.
People were running to their homes while ninjas quickly prepared to head out and see what was happening. It would not be an easy night, and the Hokage might command all the ninjas against them. Which would be terrible, considering there were more than 15,000 shinobi in Konoha, the vast majority being civilians.
Not that someone like Kushina or Tsuna, with their powers, couldn't match them in strength, but Minato wanted to avoid unnecessary deaths.
"I'm going," Minato decided when he saw the 1,000 ninjas fighting against Kushina and Tsuna. The Hokage was also retreating to gather everyone beneath the mountains. Minato vanished the next moment, leaving Root's base in the hands of his clones. While Minato was still fighting Root's ANBU, in the Senju clan.
"They're coming," Kushina told Tsuna as all the ninjas appeared heading toward them.
However, beneath them, as they entered the Senju compound, 2 aligned Kushinas clasped their hands and both created a red barrier. Several ninjas were caught by surprise mid-air. The first few managed to pass before the barrier fully closed, but hundreds of others were caught off guard, slamming into the barrier and receiving a fire attack. They screamed in terror as they felt their bodies burn. Kushina didn't have fire release, but Kurama did, and she had learned some interesting things using the fox's chakra. She wasn't an Uchiha, but she had managed to incorporate the element into a few trap-type fuinjutsu she had begun developing.
Dozens of ninjas were burned.
Not fatally, but they felt their arms scorched beneath their clothing, screaming in pain as they fell in front of the barrier. This went on for a while, until the group of ninjas began to circle around the barrier, guided by their fallen comrades. They moved to flank it, unable to hit Kushina's clones inside no matter how many explosive kunai or jutsus they launched. Kushina was fully protected. As soon as the civilian ninjas rounded the barrier, they saw their comrades being launched backwards like rockets, as the blonde girl with symbols across her body punched them faster than they could react.
"More of them are getting through," Kushina exclaimed. "We should deal with them too, Kushina," Tsuna said, as if it were obvious. "We can fight with numbers too, don't you think?" Kushina gave a mischievous smile as Suna returned to her side.
"I think you're right," she admitted. Both of them already knew how to handle this, and they crossed their fingers.
In the next moment, they began performing their jutsus. Multi-Shadow Clone Jutsu. Multi-Shadow Clone Jutsu.
A wave of smoke erupted in front of them as 100 Tsunas and 300 Kushinas appeared, the latter without the Kyuubi's chakra, as it would be too exhausting.
The same went for the Tsunas, who didn't use Sage Mode.
All 400 clones might not have had the original body's full powers, but they were all elite Jonin level. They quickly charged at the hundreds of incoming ninjas, crossing through the barrier, helped by the fact that the enemy had to go around it. A battle between the clones and the ninjas quickly broke out, catching them off guard as the girls used taijutsu. The sound of battle continued near them as well, while the Hokage launched various elemental attacks he had mastered, and the enemies only grew in number. His gaze fell on the 1,000 ninjas being stopped by just 2 girls, and he frowned. His reinforcements had been prevented from reaching the field, and he himself was injured. The Rasengan he'd taken to the stomach had done serious damage. It didn't take long before he saw more clans arriving, one of them being Tsukumo Hatake himself.
"We can't stay here," Hokage and Anbu said with concern.
"That's true, we must head to the Hokage building and gather our forces. We can also show the village what's happening. We need to rally all of Konoha's troops," he decided, heading toward the Hokage statues while the ninjas with him continued fighting against the Uchiha and the other arriving clans. "Follow me," he shouted and leapt from the building as the ninjas followed him. The clans didn't let them escape easily and quickly began a pursuit. By now, the entire village of Konoha was already in chaos. Chapter 280, Konoha Civil War 04. Third-person POV. Konoha, Year 42. Minato appeared atop one of the Senju clan's houses at that moment, as the sounds of men screaming, explosions, clashing metals, and more battle noises filled the air all around him as his ears caught what was happening. He lifted his gaze with a glint in his eyes at everything unfolding. Minato was analyzing the entire battlefield around him. The center of the village had turned into chaos between the Umbu and civilian ninjas fighting against the clans who were siding together, wanting to question and pressure the Hokage. And unsurprisingly, the main focus of everyone was aimed at a single point that was moving away, heading toward the area beneath the local statues.
And Minato instantly understood why.
The Hokage was retreating from that place with difficulty. He looked injured. Minato already knew which jutsu had caused that kind of damage just by looking at his wounds, while his eyes fell on Kushina, standing on that tower Mito had built in honor of the Uzumakis. The golden chakra of the Kyuubi was beginning to take shape around her body, creating giant fists that expanded and punched any ninja who approached when they managed to get past her clones.
Suna was more active, fighting ninjas in midair, easily knocking them down.
Even though they were Jounins, they couldn't handle someone with mastery over natural energy, which made her body several times stronger and faster.
Minato could only feel pity for all those who thought they could beat her in taijutsu.
Even if they managed to channel chakra into their limbs to surpass human strength and limits, Suna was still a monster in terms of power. She would easily break any bone she struck, even if it was coated with chakra for protection. Those fists ignored all of that. Kushina was focused as she raised her hand, creating a giant hand and crushing a group of approaching ninjas. The pile of bodies around the Senju wall was only growing with each passing moment. Kushina landed again, and it was at that moment that she felt something and quickly turned her eyes to Minato, standing on another rooftop staring at them. The same could be said for Suna, who sensed him at that very instant, and they stared at him the moment he appeared, as everything happened very quickly.
"Minato!" Kushina shouted, excited,
bursting into a joyful smile upon finally seeing him there.
Minato smiled as well. He vanished and reappeared between the two.
Several ninjas began to pass by the Uzumaki clan, chasing after the other clans going after the Hokage, while the Umbu tried to protect them from a distance as they neared the Hokage mountain. Other civilian ninjas were also advancing toward the village center along with the other clans not involved in the fight, while battles continued all over that area. All the civilian ninjas in the village were now advancing toward the Hokage building, wanting answers about what was happening. They were moving in from all directions, disorganized, unaware of what was happening to the village. The ordinary civilians were running through the streets, terrified, watching the explosions in the distance as ninjas raced across the rooftops at full speed. They thought the village was being attacked by an external enemy, and so they ran to their homes, shutting doors and windows, hoping the village shinobi would handle the problem. Minato also saw reinforcements from other clans. He could sense the Kurama clan advancing. They seemed to be with the Hokage. He also saw the Hyuga clan arriving in large numbers, separate from those already with the Hokage. It seemed the reinforcements had all been kept in the dark. Minato looked at Kushina and Suna, ignoring the girls' clones still fighting right in front of them. "Looks like everything's under control," he commented with a smile, while trying to locate Hanabi. He found her just as she was stepping out of the Senju house. The moment she appeared outside, she bled her hand and struck the ground with a summoning jutsu. A large explosion erupted beside the clan, destroying a good portion of the wall and smashing the terrain. From within the smoke, a massive creature appeared with a roar. Ruoru. It let out a thunderous sound that could be heard across the entire village. Hanabi stood atop what looked like a kind of giant tapir elephant. This was the summoning that was supposed to belong to Danzu in the future, but Hanabi had already claimed it as her contract, the Dream Eater. She appeared right as the Hyugas were passing through that area, summoned for that very purpose. In the next moment, Baku opened its mouth and began to inhale violently, as the strong wind pulled in the members of Hanabi's clan. "What is that?" The Hyugas muttered as they felt their bodies being sucked toward the beast, larger than any other building or mansion in the area, catching many by surprise. As they were pulled toward its mouth, unable to resist, Hanabi didn't let them be swallowed. Instead, she began clapping her palms into the air, generating vacuum blasts that shot toward the Hyugas, hitting them directly. In the next moment, she began her sequence of the gentle fist mixed with wind chakra, striking Hyuga after Hyuga, taking down everyone she could while some quickly fled, cursing her and calling her a traitor. Some even managed to pass through the curtain of suction and land atop the creature, where she continued fighting the Hyuga clan's taijutsu against her own people. She stunned them with another move, defeating several jounins in just a few strikes, proving how much stronger Hanabi had become compared to the members of her own clan. She also defended herself from projectiles, spinning a chakra shield so large it even covered a great portion of her summoning to protect it, creating a kind of barrier. "Well, she looks excited," Minato laughed, watching her situation. "What's the plan, Minato?" Kushina asked, her gaze falling toward the village center, where Hiruzen was fleeing from all the clans trying to reach him. The civilian ninjas who had been trying to break through Kushina's barrier began to slow down and retreat. Seeing that everything was converging at the village center, they fell back to regroup with the Hokage. "There's nothing left for us here. Let's get ready to head to the village center," Minato said, just as Nawaki landed near him, still glowing with the sixth gate. "Go on. I'll protect my sister and the others," Nawaki said, and Minato nodded. But first, he teleported next to Hanabi, who almost struck him, startled by his sudden appearance in the middle of her battle. "It's me," he murmured with a smile. "Minato, don't come up on me like that," she muttered, still trying to keep the Hyugas at bay. Another group was advancing toward them. Minato saw it. His eyes landed on them, remembering the feeling he had inside Danzu's genjutsu. Suddenly, his eyes gleamed with a power unlike anything in this world, and a strange wave burst from his body, immediately rushing toward the group of more than 30 ninjas charging at them. The wave passed invisibly. Not even the censors or those with Byakugan, who were present, noticed it, until they began to feel something wrong, losing consciousness. They simply couldn't understand why. One by one, the 30 ninjas began to collapse, while Hanabi, who had been ready to fight, stood there with her mouth open, stunned and unable to comprehend what was happening. She murmured, looking at Minato for answers. He had done something, but she couldn't tell what, though she did feel a strange wind coming from him, something even her Byakugan didn't detect. "Well, it's a new trick I learned recently," Minato murmured, now that there were no more enemies left around them. He seemed to have figured out how to release, in some way, his conqueror's haki, but at the same time, he felt it was still weak and couldn't do much beyond knocking out a few dozen ninjas. It wasn't something that could turn the tide of a war, but it was a start.
In any case, he turned back to Hanabi with a serious look. I'd like you to keep this place safe while I go with Kushina and Suna. Can you stay here and support Nawaki in case anyone tries to kidnap your grandfather or the others? Minato asked as she nodded, a determined look in her eyes. All right. Go take care of things. I'll be fine protecting them, she said, and he kissed her. All right. With that, he left the girl slightly blushing atop Baku. He disappeared again, rejoining the two girls. Now that there was no one left for them to fight and most of the clans had already moved toward the village center, they were the last ones now. Minato, what was that? Suna asked after seeing what had happened on that side, watching the Hyuga ninjas and others collapse. Kushina was also looking at him, demanding answers. Yeah, what was that? She growled. Minato couldn't answer. Let's head to the village center now. We'll talk later. Too much is going on right now, he said. I'm not talking about the ninjas, I'm talking about your kiss with Hanabi, Databane. Kushina complained, pouting. The fox inside her was rolling its eyes, preferring not to listen to teenage romance. Minato said she could smother him with kisses as soon as they finished all of this and quickly moved ahead, joining all the shinobi heading there at that moment. Finally, Hiruzen managed to enter his building, kneeling as he landed on the floor, his breathing uneven. His gaze turned toward the village, which was glowing from all directions with jutsus, as if it were at war. It left him saddened and speechless. Even with all the measures he and Danzo had taken to prevent this scenario, everything pointed in the opposite direction. How could this happen, he murmured, wondering what the second Hokage would think about all of this. At the same time, something made him realize that someone was missing. He soon sensed two people running from the side of the building toward him, his two companions. Hiruzen, the village is in the middle of a civil war. Hamura Mitokado exclaimed, frightened. How could this happen, Hiruzen? Koharu Udatane gritted her teeth, staring at the scene before her. Where is Danzo? She demanded. I'd like to know that too. Any information on Danzo? He immediately asked one of the Umbu, looking for any updates, but the ninja shook his head. None of the teams sent to check the hideout have returned. He said. This can't be. Hiruzen murmured, full of sorrow. If Danzo wasn't there, then something had happened. He didn't want to think about it, his heart ached just imagining that Danzo might be dead, but his gaze shifted to the more urgent situation. Everything was in chaos before him. The Sarutobi, Shimura, Udatane, and Mitokado clans are arriving now. Hamura said with hope, as hundreds of ninjas came from all directions, bearing the flags of the elder clans to support them. Hiruzen welcomed the reinforcements with relief, but he needed the village on his side. Attention, everyone! Gather around me, all who support Konoha and wish it no harm, he shouted, amplifying his voice with chakra so it could be heard throughout the area. After all, he was still the Hokage and should know how to speak to the masses. The Umbu, Jounins, and allied clans nearby began heading toward him, along with other civilian Jounins who hadn't been taken down in the pile of bodies Tsuna and Kushina had created in front of the Senju clan. Meanwhile, the civilians looked confused, slowly approaching. Some went to the site, while others stopped at a distance, trying to understand how the village had entered a civil war with no warning. Soon, the sounds of battle ceased as the group split into two. Clans like the Uchiha, Nara, Aburame, Inazuka, Yamanaka, Akimichi, Hataki, and others stood in front of the Hokage building, on rooftops and in the open grounds before it. At that moment, no one was attacking anyone anymore, and the place began to fill with ninjas staring each other down. In the end, the ninjas ended up dividing into three factions. Even though not many had joined the clans allied with Minato in front of the building, many remained undecided, preferring to stay neutral, landing at a distance to better understand the situation, while others headed directly to the Hokage's building, facing the clans like enemies, placing their full faith in the Hokage as he was being attacked by a portion of Konoha. Kakashi landed at a distance, observing the situation from about 300 meters away, frowning. He was among the other neutral ninjas, unsure of what to do, while watching his father, Tsukumo Hataki, among the Uchiha, positioned with his sword in hand, wearing a serious expression, as if challenging the Hokage along with the others. How did it come to this?
He murmured, just as a light flared from deeper within the village, drawing the attention of all three factions as it moved past the neutral ninjas, heading straight for the Hokage building. Everyone's eyes turned as they saw three ninjas approaching, no one stopping them, one of them glowing with a constant source of light. The more sensitive ones could feel the chakra of the bijou, staring in shock as they saw Kushina, cloaked in her mantle, advancing from Minato's right side, and Suna at his left, all three moving together as Minato made his way toward the main group. They landed in front of the Hokage building, with his two companions beside him, while Minato's eyes locked directly onto Hiruzen, standing on the railing above, who couldn't help but grit his teeth, torn by conflicting emotions at the sight of the young man who had caused all this chaos in the village. Once, Minato had stood there below the building, receiving all the honors as a hero returning from war by order of the Hokage, but tonight, he looked up at the Hokage as his enemy. That wraps up this part of What If Transmigrated as Minato Namikaze.
Thanks so much for listening.
As always, new parts drop every 4 days, so be sure to stay tuned.
Quick reminder.
The series What If Transmigrated in Bleach World will be going on hold soon, since we've nearly caught up with the author. So now, I will be using the second most popular among the fanfics on the previous poll as the replacement for the series What If Transmigrated in Bleach World. As such, please vote in the poll and let me know which story you'd like to see next. Also check out my Patreon channel for early releases of all the series, where you can find all the series released one day ahead of YouTube. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, share it with your friends, and please consider supporting the original author as well.
See you in the next one.